All right, we are continuing in Chapter 6, Economics, dealing with prices. And we're looking at a question here. Can anyone else change prices other than consumers' demand or companies? And if we were a 100% market-based economy with no interference by anybody other than just consumers and suppliers, the answer would be no. That's not our current situation here in the U.S. We do have an entity that does have a certain amount of say in certain products and services. And that entity would be, who do you think? The government. The government may look at some either products or services from the company side or from the consumer side and say, boy, if we just let the going rate, the equilibrium price be what people, spend for a certain product, some companies wouldn't make money. You look of, say, like subsidies for some farm industries. If we just let the price of milk shake out to be the amount that people want compared to what people will produce, maybe a gallon of milk goes for like $1.50 a gallon. And you look at a farmer and say, can you actually run your company, run your farm, earning $1.50 a gallon per gallon of milk you make? And they may not be able to make a go of it, right? Their expenses, their fixed costs, plus their variable costs may exceed and continue to exceed any of their revenues, no matter how many cows they milk or how many employees they have. $1.50 a gallon is just not going to make that company go. So the government may step in and say, you know what, we're not going to let equilibrium be $1.50 for a gallon of milk. We're going to bump that up a little bit through a subsidy and paying your farmer, and say we're going to make that equilibrium price be, $2.50, $3.50 a gallon, whatever it happens to be. Again, I'm just kind of making these numbers up. There may be other ends where they say, you know what, we're going to put a top end limit. You can't charge more than this for this particular product or service. So let's take a look at those. If you jump forward to page 168, 169, we're going to talk about the idea of price ceilings and price floors. A price ceiling is the maximum legal price that can be charged for a certain product or service. An example of that would be rent control. Funny story, I came to D.C. 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, and there were some apartments that were for rent. And I saw that the price, I called them up, say, hey, I see you got an apartment for rent. Awesome. Well, here's the rate. I'm like, oh, sweet. It was pretty inexpensive at the time. And, the person on the other end of the phone, you could just, and it makes sense now, but you could just hear him going, wait a minute, this guy doesn't sound. So, excuse me, Mr. Clement, and we get going. And long story longer, it was a senior living center is what it was, right? And I'm 28 years old. I'm not going to go live in a senior living center. But the idea was those apartments for some of those seniors were rent controlled, meaning if you let it go to anybody, it'd probably be $900,000 per month in rent, but they were capping the rent at, say, $600 per month. Okay, they were setting a price ceiling. Now, the challenge with the price ceiling is ceiling you think means above, but it's actually below equilibrium. If we would let the price without government interference go to equilibrium, it would be much higher in a price ceiling situation. But the government is saying, no, we're going to set that cap. We're going to say, grandma and grandpa on a fixed income, we're only going to let you charge them this much in a rent-controlled senior living center. Now, if I'm the company who's going to go out and build stuff, I may say, well, I'm not going to build a senior center. I'm going to go build plain old regular apartments for other people. And again, that's my choice as a business. But price ceiling is you're setting the maximum legal price. And even though the word says ceiling, it's actually below equilibrium. So we'll talk about whether that creates a shortage or a surplus. We also look at something called a price floor, and a price floor is the absolute minimum price that has to be charged for this idea. The idea is minimum wage is one of them. If we just let you guys go out and work at a entry-level kind of job, and we said, you know what, we're only going to pay you what you're quote-unquote worth, that may be $2 or $3 an hour. The government says, no, you have to pay at least, I don't know what the actual number is right now. Let's call it $8 an hour. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. It's dependent on how many employees you have, but let's just call it $8 an hour to make math simple. Yeah, that job is quote unquote worth, supply and demand. It's worth $2 or $3 an hour, but we have to pay a minimum of at least $8 an hour. And again, it says floor, but floor is really above equilibrium. That job is quote unquote worth or could or should be paid with no government interference. We just let market equilibrium shake out. That job would pay you $4 an hour, but the government says, now we got to pay them a minimum of $8 an hour. Okay. Also, some price floors for some grains or milk in the prior example. And again, this will either create a shortage or a surplus, and we'll take a look at that next. So when somebody sets the price above equilibrium, what is happening? Right? When we set the price above equilibrium, we're talking about a price floor. We're talking minimum wage is our example. And what are we creating by doing that? We're creating surplus. Surplus. Okay, so these three ideas kind of go together. If we didn't have a thing called minimum wage, if we just said, you know what, you're going to get paid whatever the market shakes out, maybe your job is only worth $4 an hour, we're saying no. And again, $4 an hour is maybe down here. This is what that job is worth, but we're saying no, minimum wage is going to pay you $8 an hour. Right? So from that end of things, you're creating a surplus, you're creating lots of people who would work at $8 an hour, but not many companies that are willing to pay at $8 an hour, right? So a price floor is creating a surplus. Somebody sets the equilibrium price below. Again, these are more your rent controls. This is a price ceiling situation, meaning and rent controls is our example. If we would let the going rate for this apartment go to whatever equilibrium is, let's say that it'd be $1,000 a month. We're putting a cap or a ceiling on it, but the ceiling here is $600 a month. Right? If we just let it go to equilibrium, it'd go up here to equilibrium, but it's not. We're saying, nope, here's the ceiling, here's the maximum that you can charge that person. And again, you're going to end up creating shortage. Okay? Because there's lots of people that would love to buy at $600 per, but businesses are saying, well, the going rate's $1,000 per. Why would I make a bunch of senior living if I'm only going to be able to charge $600 per, right? So from a demand side of things, there's a shortage of housing at $600 per because the market equilibrium is $1,000 versus, you know what? For this particular job, we'd be paying $4 an hour, but everybody's got to get paid at least $8 an hour. So you got a surplus of workers out there saying, hey, I'm ready to work at $8 an hour. And the business is going, well, I don't know that I need all of you at $8 an hour because this job is really worth $4 an hour. And all of those costs are going to get factored into whether that company is making money or not making money. Now, some of their, whether it be variable or fixed costs going up, that's putting a squeeze on the profit they were making. Depending on the type of product they had, they may or may not be able to change the price all that much. Last idea here in chapter 6, we're going backwards in the textbook to pages 164. What happens when we start moving our curves, right? So we have some kind of a situation, whatever that situation is, and we got this supply curve moving out to the right. Now, again, moving right, which we've talked about in both chapter 4 and 5, moving to the right in general is good. So this could be a situation where resource prices are going down, like, say, gasoline. Or this could be some new technological advance and companies can make more at the same prices because their input costs are less, or some technology makes it more efficient, or there's more companies now making this product, whatever that happens to be. So we look at what our old equilibrium was, and we label these up with D1 and S1, right? Demand 1, supply 1. This is what my equilibrium price and quantity were. Now something has changed and it's pushed this supply curve out to the right. So now I have a new equilibrium, and I got a new equilibrium quantity here in blue, and I got a new equilibrium price here in blue as well. So the supply curve moved right. Well, what happened? My equilibrium went from here to here, and the result was price went down. This was my old price. This is my new price after the supply curve pushed to the right. My quantity went up, right? This was my old equilibrium quantity. This is now my new equilibrium quantity. On your exam, you're going to be given situations that say, hey, this curve is getting changed. Or I may even say, you know, this company's corporate income tax went away. No more corporate income tax. Well, that's a good thing for a business. So all businesses, no more corporate income tax during the coronavirus situation. Good thing for the company. Supply curve pushes out to the right. You know, your cost of running your business is going down. Well, what's going to happen? Well, in theory, prices will go down and quantity will go up because companies can afford to make more. As they make more, at those lower prices, more people are willing to buy it, kind of the definition of demand there. So the net result is price goes down and quantity goes up. We look at a situation where, again, this was, and we deal with the ones, so D1, S1, this was our equilibrium price and quantity here. And something happened to the company that was bad. Again, moving into the left, bad. So costs go up, taxes go up, amount of companies making stuff goes down. Companies go out of business because they can't afford to run during the coronavirus situation. Government regulation, whatever it is, right? Situation is bad. Here's my new equilibrium price. Okay, so I ended up moving from this point here up to this point here, right? The supply curve went to the left. That results in bad. So what happened to price? What happened to quantity? Well, price was here, has now gone up. Quantity was here and has now gone here. Quantity goes down. So as we notice, our supply curves moving right or left kind of have opposite effects with price and quantity. Here we got another situation where the demand curve goes to the right. So again, D1, S1. Here is where my equilibrium was. We'll go green this time. Here is where my new equilibrium is. Okay, so something happened pushing the demand curve out to the right. no more income taxes, subsidies come back, super duper popular new item, whatever that happens to be. You saw this with cell phones. All of a sudden, cell phones start getting internet and everybody wants a cell phone. Well, now you look at what's going on with cell phones, and they're charging $1,000 for the latest iPhone. And they'll wiggle around it and say, we'll sell you a contract, or we'll rent it to you, or we'll do whatever. But the point is, the sticker price of a new cell phone is $1,000. That's expensive, right? So this was, in red, my old equilibrium price. This became my new equilibrium price. So I got the demand curve moving to the right, which again, everybody can afford more. That's a positive. What's happening to price? Well, price went up. What happened to quantity? Quantity went up. So notice that the demand curve is changing right. Both of them are going up. Here we look at a situation where the demand curve is moving left. Again, not so good. We start looking at price and quantity. S1, D1, here was my old equilibrium price and quantity. I now look at my new equilibrium price and quantity. What happened when demand went left? Well, price went down. Right? We went from here to here, and quantity went down from here to here. So a way to potentially look at this is from a law of demand standpoint, you got an inverse or an opposite relationship between price and quantity, but once the demand curve moves right or left, they kind of move together. You look at supply, law of supply means as you can charge a higher price, that quantity provided will go up, right? They go together, but when you start changing supply, either right or left, they kind of go in opposite directions. So here are some questions we'll take a look at. We'll, in theory, have you guys watch this, hit the pause button, guess at what's going to happen, and then we'll show you what I think is going to happen. So, prime test type questions. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. President Trump eliminates corporate Social Security tax withholdings. Okay, so step one. Is this changing the demand curve? Is this changing the supply curve? That's your first question you ask yourself. Corporate income taxes, corporate Social Security tax being eliminated. So is it supply or demand? Two, is it good? Is it bad? Right? Is a company having less taxes a good thing or a bad thing? Well, we talked about corporate, so I hope you figured out that that was supply. We talked about less taxes, no more taxes. That's good, right? So now I go, all right, supply curve's changing, and it's changing for the good. I'm going to draw my supply curve, my second supply curve, to the right of my first supply curve, right? Because this change is just going to affect it. It didn't say everybody doesn't have to pay Social Security tax. It says just corporations are stopping their Social Security tax withholdings, right? So just companies or supply curve, no more taxes on that, good thing. So that means the curve went to the right. This was my old equilibrium. This is my new equilibrium. So the question is, what happened to price and what happened to quantity? Well, price went down. And quantity went up. All right, this was old equilibrium there, new equilibrium there, price goes down, quantity goes up. Next up, President Trump eliminates the minimum wage from the consumer side only. So again, you decide, is this supply or demand? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And which direction is it going? So hit pause on the video and think of what option are we doing here. All right, welcome back. Since we're talking consumer only, we're talking the demand curve is the one moving. Eliminates, right? Eliminates minimum wage. Sorry, I might have said taxes. Eliminates minimum wage, right? So now, rather than $8 an hour, we're only paying you $4 an hour. So that's bad. So we're demand curve and bad because there is no more minimum wage. So demand 2 goes over there. This was equilibrium. This is now equilibrium. So what happened to price? Well, price went down. What happened to quantity? Quantity went down. President Trump eliminates the minimum wage for just producers, right? So again, is this supply or demand? Is this positive or is this negative? Hit pause on the video and see if you can come up with the answer. All right, welcome back. So producer is supply. Minimum wage, if you could, you'd pay these people $4 an hour to do the job, but you got to pay them $8 an hour. Well, now you no longer have to pay them that minimum wage of $8 an hour. You can pay them $4 an hour. So is that a good or a bad thing when your costs, salary, go down? Well, it's a good thing. So again, supply goes over here to the right. Right? Supply curve because producer. Good thing because costs are going down. This was my equilibrium. This is now my new equilibrium. So again, can you answer the question to price and quantity? We were here. We're now here. Price went down. Quantity went up. This one is a tricky one. Trump eliminates minimum wage for everybody. So what's going to happen? So supply curve is going right, S2, but yet demand curve is moving left. Demand 2. So this is where we were. If we just dealt with the supply side, we go to here. But now we have to deal with the demand side and we go here. So in reality, prices went down, but there really wasn't much change in the quantity. And depending on how you draw your pictures, you could look at that as an option, but we may not.